Attention comedy musicians and comedy music fans, the Logan Awards are taking open nominations for outstanding comedy songs and videos released last year for this year's awards. Did you release a comedy song or music video in 2022, or have a favorite comedy song or video that was released then? Then nominate it for the Logan Awards today. The Logan Awards are essentially the Comedy Music Awards, sponsored annually by the Funny Music Project and are presented in 3 categories: Outstanding Original Comedy Song, Outstanding Parody Song, and Outstanding Comedy Music Video. If you have a comedy song that was released in 2022 that you'd like to nominate for 2023's awards, head to LoganAwards.com and click the Nominations tab at the top. There is a minimum and maximum of 5 nominations per person. Hurry! Nominations close this year on June 30th. For more details about Logan himself, the awards, and more, check out LoganAwards.com. Help us commemorate the year's best comedy songs and music videos with a trophy, the way they do with every other form of entertainment. But if you want your favorites to win, you have to nominate them by June 30th. Get your nominations in now at LoganAwards.com, brought to you by TheFump.com.
I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
Well, there's a new Indiana Jones movie coming out around the time this episode should be released, and they're saying it's the last one. We've kind of been through that a couple of times already. So we decided to go back to when the very first time they said this was going to be the last Indiana Jones movie, the one that's conveniently titled Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. We were thinking about doing Temple of Doom, but we really wanted to focus on the Nazi punching because that's what Indiana Jones does best.
Also, this is what most people consider their favorite Indiana Jones movie.
This was the first Indiana Jones movie I ever saw.
Really?
I saw part of Temple of Doom before I really could appreciate movies. So I never really watched that full movie. But when I was old enough to appreciate movies, I actually saw Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade on television.
For a lot of people, this is their favorite Indiana Jones movie. And I understand why that is, but Temple of Doom has such a weird place in my heart, which has been ripped out of my chest and put back so many times that it's hard not to have a soft spot for that film for me. Mm-hmm. But I do see why this one tops most people's list. It's probably, it's absolutely the better made of the original trilogy, and it flows together better, and the cast has the most coherent chemistry, and, mm-hmm. all the pieces are there. So I can see why it tops everybody else's list but mine. My thing for Temple of Doom is much more nostalgia trip, I think.
And this movie was kind of done in a way to kind of answer a lot of the criticisms that Temple of Doom had, as this one, in some cases, is a bit more lighthearted. There's definitely more comedy in this film than any of the previous 2 films. And I think that was a direct response to the various violence and I guess gore, if you want to go on that, if you want to call it that, of the previous 2 movies. We do get a pretty gory scene towards the end of the movie. But it's
one of the most infamous in film history, really. But
it's no melting face, but it'll do.
The thing is we've kind of mentioned previously that the Indiana Jones movies and Temple of Doom were kind of responsible for ushering in the PG-13 rating into the rating system in America.
This and Gremlins.
Yeah, I mean, it was all kind of in that same vein, but it was very much there were a few lines that were crossed within the franchise that people thought Spielberg was pushing a few buttons for what kids should be allowed to see in the theater in an action film. So that kind of ended up necessitating the PG-13 rating. A lot of people thought. I watched these movies at a pretty young age, and I think I turned out all right.
I'm not going to answer that question because I want to live to see tomorrow.
That's a smart move on your part. You're a smart boy. The thing about Indiana Jones, though, is that while he was based on all of those, 40s adventure serials that we talked about when we talked about Raiders of the Lost Ark, he was also based on a more recent action hero as well, which was James Bond.
Mm.
And
we even got a James Bond in this movie.
And that is kind of why we have the James Bond in the movie. Because one of the things that inspired Spielberg and Lucas to even make the series in the first place was that they saw how successful the Bond franchise was at the time, because it was still going pretty gangbusters in the 70s and early 80s. And they were like, we really want to do an action hero that would become at least as big or bigger than James Bond.
And was American.
Yeah, but it was American, They thought, well, spiritually, that's already kind of the father of the role. So why don't we ask a previous Bond to do it? And they ended up asking Sean Connery, and Sean Connery's like, I'm only 12 years older than Harrison Ford, right? I am not old enough to be Harrison Ford's father. That is an insult.
I mean, now, with Dial of Destiny coming in, Ford is now 20 plus years older than Connery was in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange. And it's kind of funny because you see them do the scene. I really laughed because I had kind of halfway forgotten about it, in how they frame the scene at the beginning of the movie of, 26 years younger Sean Connery, because of course they get teenage River Phoenix to play young Indiana Jones, but they don't get a 26 years younger actor to play Sean Connery, because everybody knows what Sean Connery looked like 26 years younger,
We didn't have de-aging technology back in 1989.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point. So they can't do what they're going to be doing in Dial of Destiny with Harrison Ford and go like, well, we have this technology now and everybody knows what Harrison Ford looked like back then because that's when the original films were made. Also, we just see an actor's hands and
Connery
back.
dubbing over the actor.
And Connery dubbing over the actor, yeah. So it is kind of interesting of what would that scene have looked like if we had all that fancy Disney de-aging technology.
We would have original James Bond era Sean Connery just looking at River Phoenix.
Yeah, it's like Goldfinger era Sean Connery looking Henry Jones Sr. sitting at that desk going, saying those same lines.
And yeah, like a lot, it was a trend. Let's say it right now. There was a trend that the Muppets started. That let's take our main characters of our franchise and make them younger. Because Muppet Babies was a huge hit, and then everyone had to make their own. We had Yo Yogi, and we had Tom and Jerry Kids, and eventually would lead us to Tiny Toon Adventures. And here we eventually get the spin-off show Young Indiana Jones, which also now is on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
I want to make the joke about it, but 10 years from when this movie came out, we would get episode 1, Phantom Menace Star Wars. If it was, instead of a series, could Lucas have done a trilogy of young Indiana Jones movies?
I think that was possibly in their brains. But then, of course, we get the tragic death of River Phoenix.
Mm.
River Phoenix was such an up-and-coming actor. To everybody, it looked like he was going to be, such a star with staying appeal,
Mm-hmm.
And that he was absolutely going to be the next big thing. Had he lived, I absolutely believe that he would probably be in that vein of Oscar winning, in his middle ages now doing these prestige drama pictures and all that kind of stuff.
Pretty much where Harrison Ford would end up going.
Well, he would probably have a career like, Leonardo DiCaprio or something now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In that same kind of vein, because that's where he seemed to be going.
Mm.
Of course, we tragically lost him to that drug overdose, and we don't know where he would have gone had he lived longer, but we lost him, early 20s, I believe.
Yeah, just a few years after this movie came out.
Yeah. So I think they might have had an idea along that line, that if this movie had come out, there would have been like how did Indy meet Marion? How did Indy meet, some of the early adventures that we've heard kind of talked about.
How Indy met Marcus.
Had River wanted to, had River wanted to do that. Well, they say in this movie how Indy met Marcus is Marcus was a friend of Henry's.
Mhm.
So it might have gone through the, Indy's petulant years trying not to be an archaeologist before he decided to go back to school and get a degree. It's like
I mean, and the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones, whichever title you want to go about that series, just went in so many different directions with that show, with him having these odd jobs all over the world, and as a kid or as a young man. And I kind of do want to cover one of those stories at some point in the future.
Yeah, and they did a lot of tie-in books for that as well.
Harrison Ford actually did a few cameos in the series.
Yeah.
TVA, take us to the alternate timeline where River Phoenix lived, and we got the Young Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah. That would have been cool to see, I think.
Mm.
Because even in the short little opening that they do here,
It's like 10 minutes.
yeah, River, well, I mean, short compared to a full film.
Yeah.
Is River Phoenix absolutely nails that entire character.
River Phoenix was handpicked by Harrison Ford to play his younger self. They had worked on another film together, and Harrison Ford said, yeah, if anyone's going to play young me, it's going to be this kid.
Yeah. I mean, I do love that this whole thing happens while they're off on like a Boy Scout trip, because of course Spielberg has to be like, well, if I was a Boy Scout, then of course the greatest adventure in the world has to be the world's best Boy Scout. Because of course Indiana Jones has to be the best Boy Scout in his Boy Scout troop, even better than the Scoutmaster.
Yeah.
Who is with them, who is also lost, apparently.
It's a very, very interesting day. It's very, very convenient that every major event that shaped young Indiana Jones's personality happened on the same day. Oh, how did he get the whip? Here's how. Oh, how did he get the scar on his cheek? This is how. How did he get his trademark hat? This is how. How did he think of his look? This is how. How did he get afraid of snakes? This is how.
Yeah. How did he decide that everything should be in a museum? Well, apparently that was his dad, but the the really funny part of that to me is that he goes from, oh, don't worry, it's just a snake, to I never want to see snakes again, just by the multiplication factor of snake.
Yeah.
Like, one snake fine, 100 snakes not fine.
Yeah.
I don't really get that in my brain, and I've never quite understood that.
Comedy, I guess. Like I said, this movie has a lot more comedy and jokes than the previous films, and it's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like people have tried to explain that to me over the years. Like, no, you don't understand. It's like one snake is okay because it's like one snake, but then he falls into the whole thing of snakes, and then there's snakes later, and I'm like, yeah, I still don't get it. I don't know. My brain is weird, but the whole opening sequence is really good, and I like how it never kind of lets up. Like, from the moment you spot what you think is going to be Indy, and it turns out to be these robbers, these grave robbers instead. And all that, there's really no let up in that. It just keeps going.
And then you see the little kid, you see River Phoenix as a Boy Scout, and his friend goes, Indy, Indiana, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
Just to let the audience know, this is Indiana Jones.
Yeah. But the thing is that I like the way that everything on this is filmed, that that he's not yet the man he will become. He goes to jump on the horse and the horse moves just enough that he falls, and all of his little tricks don't quite work out the way he wants, and
yeah,
he's got the bravery that we know from later. He's got the mind that we know from later. It's just he doesn't have the practice yet, which I love.
I mean, the first time he cracks a whip, he cuts his own cheek. He cuts his chin, which is how he gets the scar. Did we need to have all of those elements in the opening scene? I don't think we did.
I mean, it's kind of cute, and I think it works. I think this works better than a lot of stuff in, say, I mean, to go back to a Star Wars comparison, like that Solo movie. Whereas, like, do we really need to know how he got
the Kessel Run?
Well, I mean, yes, I think we kind of needed to know about the Kessel Run because George Lucas was not smart enough to know that a parsec is a unit of measurement and not time. But a unit of distance and not time. But the thing about it is, like, did we really need to know where the dice hanging from the Millennium Falcon came from? Did we really need to know how he got his last name? Did we really need to know? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Most people didn't care. Most people are like, Han Solo's name is Han Solo because it's Han Solo. And a lot of it takes away from the mystique of the character rather than adding to it. Whereas something about all of this scene kind of adds to the character of Indiana Jones to me. Except for the snake thing, which has never quite made sense. But, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I think that this scene is the way to do it, and I think when people try to do stuff like they do in Solo, they're trying to recreate this scene, and they just do it kind of badly.
I don't know, but I will say this: I would rather take any of the Star Wars prequel movies condensed to 10 minutes before any of the other movies.
Yeah, that's true. I think if you're going to do a background on a character like that, in some ways, maybe shorter is better. It gets in and gets out and doesn't overstay its welcome, which I like. And it also sets up the sort of parent that Henry was.
Mm-hmm.
And his obsession with the Grail and why he and Indy probably did not have the greatest relationship going forward.
I mean, as Indy says later in the movie, they've never talked. Never once have they actually sat down and had anywhere close to adult conversation with each other. Even after Indy's mom passed. It's always been silence or business.
Yeah, he says that the last time they sat down and had a drink, it was a milkshake. So that tells you how long it's been. Like, never once in his adult life has Indy just sat down and had, like, a meal with his father, you know?
because he's always been looking for the Grail. It's been his life's obsession to find the Holy Grail.
And so much so that his mother apparently had some sort of disease that she hid from her husband.
Presumably from the child, too.
Well, I mean, yeah, but a parent doesn't generally, especially not at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would have been like, late 20, mid 20s or so. Because she already seems to have been gone by the time we see that scene at the beginning. But she keeps it from Henry until it is no longer able to be hidden and it is too late to do anything about it. If there was anything to be done about it at all, we don't know. Because they never say what illness she had. And Henry claims that she did that because she knew of how important the Grail was to him. Which, do we really believe that? Are we going to buy that?
I don't believe it, honestly. I think that's what Professor Jones told himself to make him feel better.
Yeah. It's like, oh, she sacrificed herself for the cause, and I'm not buying that. I think that she just kind of went like, yeah, he's not gonna.
There's no point in talking to the man. He's not going to listen to reason.
Yeah. The thing about it, though, is that I always really liked the way this father-son relationship was portrayed. I've always liked how it's a rather realistic portrayal of the strain between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
That you can buy them both as, you can buy Henry as a man who is much more invested in the work and the quest for the Grail, and not uncaring about his son, but that his son is an afterthought.
Mm-hmm.
And you can buy Indy as a man who desperately wants his father's love and approval, but he doesn't know how to show that. So it just kind of comes out in snark and anger. And
also, this is the 1940s. That we're still in the men don't show emotion kind of vibe. I mean,
but there's that absolutely wonderful bit where, after that great action sequence and
with the tank or
with the tank, and and they're all standing there and everybody thinks that Indy has gone over with the tank, and they're looking over and the audience is seeing Indy climb back up the cliff, so we know he's not dead. But you hear Henry going like, I never told him how I felt. I could have just taken 5 minutes, and all that. And of course, Indy doesn't hear any of that. But when he gets back up and he's looking over the cliff of like, okay, what are we looking at? And Henry turns around and he just hugs Indy.
I thought I lost you, boy.
Yeah, and that moment of like, and the two of them play it so well, because like nobody else sees his face, but just the like smile on his face, and the like, my dad is hugging me.
It's all,
I'm getting a hug.
it's what he wanted. You know, he's get that love and affection from his father.
Yeah, like I'm getting a hug from my dad. This is the greatest feeling in the world. You know, like it's a real genuine hug. It's not like that like straight guy hug of like I pull you in, I give two pats, and then I shove you away. You know, like it's like a genuine prolonged hug of affection, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a like beautiful little smile because he's just like, oh,
My dad really does love me.
you know, my dad really cares about me, you know? And then it's like completely undercut by like, what are you sitting down for? We got work to do, you know? Like, but it's such a perfect kind of, you know, and the bit with the vase, you know, when he comes in to rescue his dad, and he's like, "Yeah, don't worry, my head's fine." And he's like,
No, this is a fake.
"Oh, thank goodness." And there's that moment of like on Indy's face of like, "Oh, good, my dad actually does care about me." And then he goes like, "Oh, it's a fake." And then it's like moment of like, "Ah, crushed again. Yep, there's the feeling I know." Yeah, it's like.
Yeah.
Every moment like that is played so perfectly of like here's just a little bit of hope, and then nope, I was wrong to hope. I knew it.
And you know, that's the relationship throughout the entire movie. You know, it's Henry is very focused on the quest. You know, we have to do this, we have to do that. Don't trust, and you know, don't trust Elsa and all that. And Indy is, you know, he lets his feelings get in the way. You know, he's, you know, you know, he allows, don't hurt Elsa. I'll give you what you want, and then the big heel turn from Elsa. Blonde women named Elsa. What's the deal?
I mean, it was a common name, and I think they wanted the audience immediately to be like, ah, she's a Nazi, like.
How did you know? She talks in her sleep.
That was apparently an ad lib from Sean Connery. That you weren't supposed to know that she had also slept with Henry until much later in the movie, but apparently it was so funny that they just decided to leave it in.
I was going to let that be the problem for the next man. Yeah, well, I was the next man.
Yeah.
And it's like whenever that gets brought up in the narrative, it's just Harrison Ford, this look of disgust on his face. It's like, really? I don't know what he's more disgusted at, his father sleeping with her or her sleeping with him.
I mean, probably the latter, I would say, but
she had her reason. She slept with him because she wanted the Grail.
Yeah, I mean, which is, you know, a lot of people say that, like, well, it seems in the movie like she really had more feelings for Indy, and I'm like, but did she though? Like, it just kind of seems like she was using them both for the same reason.
Pretty. That's my gathering of them. That was my gathering of the scene, especially the scene when earlier in the movie, you know, Indy goes into her room and it's trashed, and they have this weird, awkward flirtation where he forces a kiss on her.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is I think if she had to choose between them, she would have gone for Indy because he was closer to her age and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think she really particularly had much feeling for either of them. I think they were both means to an end.
Yeah, it was all about getting the Grail. even in the end, her thing was get the Grail. She, risks her own life just to grab that Grail because that's what most important. Even at the cost of her own life, what's more important is getting that Grail and getting the glory and getting the money and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, she says that she doesn't believe in Nazi ideology. She believes in the Grail. But the thing is that it's always kind of ambiguous what she wants the Grail for. When she takes the Grail at the end, she's like, "Come on, Indy, you and me, we've got the Grail now." But she never goes to drink from the Grail. She never says anything about, like, and now we can be rich, or, and now the Fuhrer will give me a high position or something. Like, she never has a plan for the Grail. It's just like, yay, I've got it.
Even her boss, Donovan, he just wants the Grail for immortality.
He has a plan for the Grail. I want to drink from the Grail so I can live forever. Plan for the Grail. Nazis want the Grail so that they can have immortal soldiers that will take over the world. Plan for the Grail. Indy and his father want it for like a museum or whatever. They're in it for the history part and, proving it's real and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're historians and archaeologists. Like, that makes sense. But Elsa's just kind of like, what's she going to do with it? Like, put it in her china cabinet? Like, she doesn't really seem to have, like, is she going to sell it? Is she going to be young and pretty forever? Like, what does she want to do with it? But in the end, it's like her obsession. Kills her.
I mean, as Henry says at the end of the movie, she thought she found a prize. Like, maybe it was more of a financial thing. I can sell this to someone, make a lot of money. Or I could drink from the Holy Grail and live forever.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff she could do with it in the context of the movie, because everybody else says what they want to do with it, except for her. I just find that interesting.
Maybe she didn't even think. Maybe she didn't have a plan. Because she purposely gives Donovan the wrong Grail, takes the right Grail, and she's going to walk out that cave with it. And I don't think she thought of anything else after that.
Yeah. I've always loved the scene when they have the Joneses tied up in the room of the castle.
Dad, what? Dad, what?
Yeah. But I love the kind of how they set up the kind of weird bumbling nature of Henry there, because he's like, okay, try to burn through the ropes, and then immediately Henry does the dumbest thing ever,
drops the lighter
and turns the lighter underneath his wrist to turn the flame on himself, which I always, even as a kid, I was like, why would you do that?
He's not an adventurer, he's a professor.
It also has one of my favorite continuity errors, because when he drops the lighter, it falls with the open side of the lighter one way. And then 2 shots later, it flips around as he's blowing on it. So if you look, the cap of the lighter is facing like right, and then like 2 shots later, it's facing left, and then it keeps flipping back and forth. It's just always one of the little things I noticed when I was a kid, and I can never unsee whenever I watch the film. But I always laughed because all of my German comes from Spielberg films.
Mhm.
So I can only say like 3 or 4 words in German, and pretty much all of them are things like, go faster, and various bits of like expletives and stuff. Because that's the only thing you ever hear in movies like this is just like random Nazis screaming at each other like, get them! No, that way! And it's like... So all of my German is absolutely useless unless I'm telling you to, like, go get somebody escaping from you during an action film. This is one of the most comedic escape scenes during an action film, and I love it because it's played to like perfection by the both of them.
And it's played up great. I mean, the two have great comedic chemistry together. Like I said, it's adding more comedy into the film, and it works great. Especially the general calm demeanor of Henry versus let's go of Indy.
And how every time Indy does something that he thinks looks cool, and he's right, because it's every time the audience goes like, yeah, he always turns around to his dad, and his dad just gives him this disapproving look like,
that's completely unimpressed.
I bet you think you look cool right now. You're not cool,
Mm-hmm.
Which is such a like letdown for
quit hot dogging, son. We got a thing to do.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, that's such a moment,
Yeah, we're like when they're on the motorcycle or something like that.
And he just looks over like, look, Dad, I just killed a Nazi. And like, oh yeah,
that's what you're supposed to do. Don't.
Yeah. You're supposed to kill Nazis, son. What? You want a gold star? Like.
You want a cookie?
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's such a vicious thing, It's like coming home and being like, I made a 90 on my test. Why wasn't it a 100? It's like,
yeah.
Like,
Or
it's like that kind of move.
Yeah.
Oh, like Henry Jones is just like the absolute gold medal parent of like underselling, the cool thing your kid just did. Ugh.
Yeah.
Like, you got the world's best kid there, Henry Jones, and like you're absolutely giving him nothing. You're giving him nothing. And like, also, we got to talk about the thing about the name, right?
All right, let's go there. Yeah.
Because, all right, everybody knows it's Indiana Jones, and then in this movie, we get the origin of the name Indiana Jones. That he had the dog that was named Indiana, and he really loved the dog, and so when he became an adventurer, he took the name Indiana, and he wants all of his friends, and apparently his family too, to call him Indiana.
I mean, he's even calling himself Indiana as a teenager, as his friends is all calling him Indy.
Yeah.
And the dog,
and apparently that dog is still alive, because we see the dog in the thing. It's a Alaskan Malamute, and he's such a cute dog. But the thing is that is apparently a joke, because the character was named after a dog that George Lucas had. And so they thought it would make a good name for like an adventuring character, So he was like, all right, that's funny. And it would be funny if the character also got the name from the dog. So they wrote the joke into the script. But the thing is like the entire film, Henry Jones calls his son Junior. We see him say it in the first scene when he's a teenager, and we see it throughout the film as an adult as well. And we see that Indy hates it every time.
Don't call me Junior.
Yeah.
To the point where he just gets angry, grabs a Nazi's gun, and shoots a bunch of them.
Yeah, which, you know, I mean, if you're gonna take your anger out on something, that's an appropriate response. The thing about it is like, Junior, and no offense to anybody who like is called that and you find it wonderfully endearing and stuff. I'm not gonna, knock anybody's name that they like being called. But when Henry calls Indy Junior, it's not like an affectionate nickname or something. He doesn't call Indy a name. He calls him a title. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if he were to call him Henry or Hank or, something else, or like by a middle name or whatever, that would be him calling him by a name. When he says, like, my name is Indiana, and he goes, well, we named the dog Indiana, the appropriate response would be like, we named you Henry or Hank or, Henry Jackson Jones or whatever his middle name is. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes, he's a junior by default of there is already a Henry Jones Sr. To call him junior is just to be like, you're an extension of me.
I mean, he calls him either junior, kid, or boy.
Yeah. And it's not really a way of seeing him as a full individual. It's like calling him like copy or part 2. Mm. Or it's like the king of the realm calling his firstborn son heir. It's like it's your title or your job, not your name. And it's like, I get that some families use that affectionately or whatever, and that some people do find that an affectionate nickname, and that's fine. But for Indy, that is not an affectionate name. Okay?
And Henry never says it with affection.
Oh yeah, it's never once said with affection. It's always done harshly. It's always junior or boy or, whatever. And the only time he ever calls Indy by a name, and more specifically by Indy's name, meaning the name that Indy wants to be called, is when name. He saves his life.
Yeah. Indiana, you have to let it go.
Yeah. In that moment, that's the only time they ever really connect. And that's when Indy chooses to let the Grail go and return to his father. And I think that's the only time that Henry ever really sees Indy as a person and as something that he truly loves more than anything in the world.
There's also a bit of proud from Henry. Indy found the Grail. He used the Grail to say he could have used the Grail for anything, but he used the Grail to save his father's life.
Yeah, and Indy only drank from the Grail to ensure it was the correct Grail. Mm-hmm. He had no desire to drink from the Grail. He had no desire for the powers of the Grail for himself. The only reason he took a sip of the Grail was to make sure it was the right one. Mm-hmm. And that it would save his father. which was a pure task, you know? And once he knew that, he was, willing to do that. And the only reason he turned back for the Grail was probably for his father. He said, "Dad, I can get it. I can."
His fingertips are touching the Grail.
Yeah, and he sees his dad there. He knows this is his dad's dream. I think the only reason he reached back, because when his dad wasn't there, he's telling Elsa, "Leave it. It's not worth it." But his dad is there, and this is his dad's dream. And it's so close.
His entire life, he's been trying to find the Holy Grail, and it's right there. It's within his finger. It's within in his reach, touching it with his fingertips. Dad, I can give you your dream right now.
This is the thing that you cared about more than me, more than my mother. This is the thing. Maybe this is the thing I can give you that will make you love me. And Henry, in maybe the only good thing he's ever done in his life. We don't know. I don't know. I do not really have a lot of respect for Henry Jones. I don't know if that's coming through. But Henry, in like the one good thing he does, actually says like, "No, let it go. I've got it."
Elsa's and Let It Go. It keeps coming back.
Yeah. But that I'm not really sure that ever really. I mean, it struck me, kind of in my heart, but I'm not sure my brain ever really fully grokked that until this watch through. That connection to the name in that moment, that is the only time in the movie he ever actually fully recognizes Indiana as his son. And then when they're outside again, he's like, "Well, Junior, but it's said a little more affectionately. And then we're back to like, Dad, And even though we're not really talking about the fourth movie, you can tell they kind of drifted apart again a little bit. I mean, it seems like it wasn't as bad as before. Because he does, we know that Henry has passed by the time of the fourth movie, but you feel that they kind of did drift apart again after that adventure a little bit. And I do kind of wonder if that was part of it. Like, there's still that bit of animosity of like, I asked you for a very simple thing, which is just to kind of respect the person I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that there was I'm going to be real, I've never seen the fourth film. It is kind of a joke with me that I kind of don't acknowledge the fourth film's existence.
I mean, that's valid. We'll see how the fifth one goes.
We'll see.
I've got higher hopes for it, but again, that's not a high bar to cross.
Yeah. Sidebar though, before we go anywhere else, the fact that this is still very much a Paramount movie. In fact, the first four films, as well as the TV series, still has the Paramount logo before it. And this was on Paramount Plus up until recently. So I'm wondering if Disney and Paramount has some sort of deal to bring the films to Disney Plus. I mean, since Disney does own the character of Indiana Jones, since they bought Lucasfilm, was this some sort of agreement between Disney and Paramount to allow these movies on Disney Plus for the time being to coincide with the release of the new movie?
Yeah, because they only hit Paramount Plus like, I don't know, 2-3 days before we recorded this, so I don't know.
I mean, when we recorded the first Indiana Jones episode, when we did Raiders all those years ago, it was still on Netflix. And then right after that, it went to Paramount Plus when it first launched. And now it's on Disney Plus. So, yeah.
It is so difficult to keep up with where anything is streaming at any given point, or if it is streaming at all.
There are some sites that can help with that, but they're not. I mean, they're not updated on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, there are sites that are good for that, as far as, you know, if you type in whatever movie you're looking for and the word streaming after it into Google, you can generally get a good feel for where it's at any given time. But stuff updates so quickly that sometimes those sites can't even keep up with it either. I mean, as far as like stuff like Indiana Jones, I love it so much I just keep physical copies around. Mm-hmm. For Indiana Jones, I have multiple physical copies in multiple formats. You know, I still have Indiana Jones in widescreen VHS format, to be honest. But I know that that's not what everybody does. Mm. So I am still a big believer of keeping physical media around if you can.
Especially, you know, we mentioned it last week, especially now that even Disney Plus is starting to remove content, even its own original content from its service.
And that directly goes against the original promise of Disney Plus, because Disney Plus, when it launched, had promised that it was originally going to be the Disney digital catalog. Like, it was basically going to be the Disney archive all the time, always.
No more Disney Vault. It's gone. It's gone forever, and now it's back.
Yeah. And everybody's going like, well, you know, it costs a lot for server space to do. And I want to go like, Disney owns 80% of the entire world. Like, if they can't do it, it can't be done. And honestly, don't tell me it can't be done, because I know it can. You know?
They can afford this. They can afford to pay their workers. They can afford to pay their writers. They can afford to pay their actors.
So what I'm saying is that they can, they just aren't, because a couple of executives want a seventh yacht. Yeah. And I'd rather preserve media culturally for the sake of humanity than have some dude that does nothing have a seventh yacht. And that is a hill I am perfectly willing to die on. And probably will, because of the pollution of that dude's seventh yacht. So, yeah. But Indiana Jones is really cool.
A lot of this movie, I mean, in every Indiana Jones movie, there is that bit of the supernatural with, and we actually do get a shout out to Raiders of the Lost Ark, because we get a mention of the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, there is one scene in this film where I swear that Marcus is having a flashback to being told about the Ark of the Covenant. And I don't know if you caught it, or if I'm just like reading too much into it, but there is a moment where Marcus is trapped in the tank and the Nazi is going on about, like, you know, we will have the Grail and we will rule the world and it will be Nazis everywhere and stuff. And Marcus just gets this really far away look and he's like, trust me, you do not know of the powers of which you meddle. And he just has this like really haunted look, and you know that he can just hear vicariously the screams. where like Indy got like really drunk one night and told him about what went down.
And I do like, the Indy, straight up, when they're getting shot at, and Henry, talks about this, like you act like this is a regular occurrence, and he says, yeah, this happens to me all the time. People are just shooting at him just for going on these adventures.
Yeah. Well, we do see the end of that Cross of Coronado adventure, when it goes from teenage him to adult him, finally tracking it down again, and they're shooting at him and punching him, and he eventually blows up the ship and gets the cross back. Mm-hmm. But so I mean, it had just happened to him like a few weeks earlier, but
a lot of this movie is based on faith, belief. Since this is the Holy Grail, this is the cup of Christ. They, the as they say in the film, the cup Jesus drank at the Last Supper, the cup that the blood flowed into at the crucifixion. That a lot of this, even finding the Grail, relied a lot on faith. Indy has to take a literal leap of faith to get to the Grail. And all of this faith is something that Henry takes very seriously. Yes, he has the drawings of the glass art on in his diary, and he slaps Indy when he invokes the name of Jesus. So it's like, it seems that Henry is a very religious man, despite him being also a man of science. When Elsa dies, Henry says she didn't believe in the Grail. She thought she found a prize. And I think that's kind of the at least the moral that this movie is wanting to tell you, versus faith versus glory. Because the Nazis didn't really believe in the Grail. They just wanted the Grail because it could grant them immortality. Donovan didn't want the Grail out of belief in Jesus or anything. He wanted it because it could make him immortal. We really don't know what Elsa wanted the Grail for, but she just wanted the physical object of the Grail. And when it was all said and done, Henry was willing to let that Grail go because he got what he wanted. He got the proof that the Grail exists. It renewed his faith. He saw the immortal knight as the cave is collapsing, and gives him the wave. So he, as he says, he got illumination from the adventure versus glory or riches, which to him was more important. And you could say it sort of renewed any kind of faith that Indy would have had if he had any to begin with.
Well, the thing is like, a lot of people call faith the, belief in things not seen. So I don't know if you would really call it faith with Indy, because he'd already had, we know, at least 2 moments in his life where he came across the supernatural absolutely working, where he had proof. Because both in the stones in Temple of Doom and again in the Ark, when in Raiders, he sees the power of these objects, and one of them is specifically supposed to be in the Judeo-Christian tradition, from that specific god. I don't know why he would have any reason to disbelieve if this object existed, it would not also be imbued with power, Mm-hmm. He might not believe the object exists at the beginning, but, once he steps in there and there's like a 700-year-old knight, he's like, okay, all right. Just like, and definitely by the time you get to disintegrating Nazi, you're like, all right, there's definitely something going on here. By this point in the story, Indy is an idiot if he doesn't already know there are forces beyond his ken,
I mean, the next movie he meets aliens.
But I'm just talking about in the context of this film,
The original trilogy.
The Tridge. Indy has already seen at least two things that are only explainable if there are supernatural powers that come from somewhere. So, he steps into that room. We see the mechanisms for how the booby traps work. So up until that point, he's like, all right, maybe someone just set up some booby traps. Because we see the saw blades and we see him stopping the mechanism. So we know that's not supernatural. And we see theoretically how the, stepping stones on the letters are supposed to work. Except it really doesn't, because he should have been dead the first time he made a misstep. Because technically the way the stepping stones are supposed to work is that when you see the undershot of him dangling, you see the pillars coming out from the stone of like where they're supposed to connect up to the letters. And none of the letters Indy is dangling from have any support system to them. So why they didn't also crumble and him fall through, I don't know.
Plot armor.
And also how the other, like how the Nazis made it through after, like how Donovan and Elsa made it through on the correct stepping stones, I don't know.
Well, I mean, they were, I think they were right there with Henry when he said, you have to spell the name of God. But in the Greek pantheon,
but they were standing too far away. Like, he's mumbling to Sala and to Brody. Mm-hmm. And they're like, no, try not to talk. But the other two are standing closer to the door of the so I don't really think they're hearing him except for when he shouts out, because he's speaking too low. So I'm a little unsure how they made it through that trap, unless like maybe shoe prints. I don't know. And then the last one is so simple to figure out, even if he hadn't have put the sand on it, that I'm not sure how that was really going to cause anybody's death. You either just go like, F that and turn around, or you make it at that point. Like, that's pretty easy, because once you step off, that's a relatively wide ledge for most people. Like, unless you just go like, I'm gonna leap, and then you just like go like, oh, there's something here, and then just fall over.
I mean, leap of faith, they do say it, but it's a. I mean, I do like how the bridge is blending into the wall, so you kind of have to do.
I mean, it's a cool idea, but I'm just saying, like, as a booby trap that is supposed to cause death, if you don't pass it, I'm not really sure how that's gonna cause either. It's supposed to cause either pass or death. You know? Like, the other two are either you've nailed this or you die. Except for Indy, who does not pass it and somehow he still lives to try again. He gets a mulligan on that second one. Also, I don't I don't get the first one with the saw blades, because even though he kneels, there is a second saw blade that would kill you even if you kneel. So even if you understood that penitent means kneel, I don't understand how you're supposed to understand that penitent means kneel and tuck and roll.
Yeah.
Because the tuck and roll, not really an important part of most prayer ceremonies. Like, just don't really get that one. Never have quite understood that one.
It's a movie.
It's like, bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Let me come to confession and do the tuck and roll. Don't really see that one very often. But okay.
Also,
they really didn't want anybody getting past that first stage, is what I'm saying.
Also, one thing that the knight says that I had completely forgotten. The boundary is the price of immortality, meaning that the Grail cannot pass by the seal at the beginning of the cave, as we see, it's cave-in, but also that seems to also be the price of immortality, meaning that you cannot leave the cave or you will not be immortal. Hence the 700-year-old knight staying there to guard the Grail. If he were to walk out of that cavern, he would no longer be immortal.
Yeah, which I think is the point when they're like, oh, the other two brothers came back 130 years later. They probably stayed around for a while, and then they were like, two of us have to go back out in the world and figure out something to do to make sure the Grail will stay safe. Because eventually somebody's going to figure out where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And if they bring like a giant army, there's only 3 of us. So they probably, drank from the Grail, got all their strength up, But the thing is I think it probably, even if you pass out of the cave, it probably brings you back to like the best health you'd be in for whatever age you were when you drank from the Grail.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Which is probably why Indiana Jones is wandering around at 80, still riding horses and punching Nazis and stuff. Is because he drank from the Grail. Like, he's not immortal. He's probably still gonna die soon, but he's really, really good health for an 80-year-old.
That was one of the conversations I remember when Crystal Skull came out. How can Henry Sr. be dead? He drank from the Grail. Shouldn't he be immortal? But it seems that the immortality is gone once you pass out of the cave.
Yeah, he was probably really, really healthy for a guy, whatever age he was supposed to be at that time. But whatever happened to him after he left happened to him,
Aged normally.
Yeah. Because the other 2 brothers left and they died. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember other people being like, oh, they must have not drank from the Grail. It's like, they had to have drunk from the Grail because they came back 130 years after the Crusade. Mm-hmm. It says that in the movie. So, like, yeah, they had to have had extended lives. It's just that once they left the cave again, they restarted aging and, all that normally. Hmm. But when they left that cave, man, were they in really good health, So they're obviously the ones that started that, like, cult of the cruciform cross, or whatever that's redundant. The cruciform cross, the cruciform sword, isn't it? Whatever. The guys that are there talking to Indy and show up at the end to try to stop the Nazis and then get wiped out. They probably started that group, and they probably put up a whole bunch of other stuff to try to keep it safe, and they're probably the ones that, planted a bunch of other stuff throughout the story.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just the last of the brothers there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were probably looking for someone who was, because the knight says, "I knew you would come." So they were probably saying like, "Hey, we're going to start a new search for somebody who will be strong enough to replace you." Like, you're not going to have to stay in this cave forever. And I don't think that he's telling the truth when he's like, "Oh, my strength has failed me." I think he's just like, "Oh, thank goodness my replacement is here. I get to go retire."
What year is it again?
Yeah.
19, you said. 19.
Yeah. Because Indy's like, that was like 700 years ago. And he's like, "Yes, a long time to wait." And he's like, "I've only had the one book to read this entire time." So I do think that that's probably there.
Yeah.
You know what I always wondered at the end?
Hmm.
Did Sala ever get those 5 camels back to his brother-in-law for that car? Because we don't see him have any camels when they're riding off into the sunset, because it would ruin the shot. But, like, I do wonder if at some point Sala was like, "Okay, we need to make a detour, because my brother-in-law is going to be really mad about that car."
No camels.
Sala, that is 5 camels. Can't you count? But honestly, I really want Sala to not be in trouble with his brother-in-law. I'm very worried about that.
He lives. We'd have seen him in the trailer for Dial of Destiny.
Well, that doesn't mean he didn't get in trouble with his brother-in-law. There could be like a whole like, "Indy, I have been estranged from my brother-in-law for 30 years because of you." Like,
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, we've met Sala's wife before and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, like, her brother-in-law could be like a real piece of work. We don't know.
So, I think that's everything we can talk about this film. So, Kiki, does Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade have the magic?
Of course it does. This is a great film.
I'm going to agree with you. This does have the magic. This is a classic adventure story. And as you said, many people consider it their favorites of the Indiana Jones saga. Neither one of us has seen Dial of Destiny yet, as it has not been released at the time of this recording. So we don't know how that's going to go. But
I mean, I'm looking very much forward to it myself, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So let's move on to next week. And next episode will be releasing on June 19th. Juneteenth. And in honor of that, we are going to be taking a look at the movie Ruby Bridges, the story of the young black girl that went into a segregated school. So that's going to be a very interesting episode next week. And I'm kind of looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah.
So come back next week for Ruby Bridges, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Your mother was a hamster and your father smelt lavender berries. I had to get a Monty Python reference in this thing somehow.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it. Podcasts are fun,
but there's work to be done.
We encourage you to get involved. Here are some organizations we support.
The American Civil Liberties Union fights for the constitutional rights of all Americans. Find them at aclu.org.
The National Network of Abortion Funds helps people find access to safe abortion services. Their site is abortionfunds.org.
The Trevor Project provides a 24/7 crisis helpline for LGBTQ youth and education services for schools on LGBTQ issues. They can be found at thetrevorproject.org.
Or find a way to help in your area. Is that good, or do you want to do a third round?
I think we can do that, and you can piece it together from the two.
All right, that sounds good. Let's stop the recording.